my pleasure and honor to introduce you to our moderator today. Elizabeth Jennings is Managing Partner at Venture Atlas Labs, a commercial strategy and investment firm that supports global healthcare and life science companies in US market success. Elizabeth is focused on solving the most challenging problems that new healthcare innovations face across 28 countries, and I know that you've lived in some of them actually, and all kinds of complexities. Her career has taken her through each side of the innovation ecosystem, from nimble startups to multinational public healthcare corporations, academia and academic consortiums, as a consultant for multinational VCs, and as a federal grant reviewer and subject matter expert for domestic and foreign initiatives. Elizabeth, it's a true pleasure to have you here today. You will be introducing us to our panel, and over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. You know, we have a really unique opportunity here that I hope you have noticed. Many times when we're talking about the future, we're talking about innovation and entrepreneurship, or we're talking about late-breaking science just published from clinical trials in a very medical sense. Or we might be talking about academic initiatives and what is coming out of academia. But here we have a very unique composition of the entire ecosystem. So when we talk about revolutions and we talk about the future, we talk about policy and diplomacy, here we have the opportunity to have conversations not just on what the future is, but how we're going to go and make it a better future. So it was with great pleasure I'd like to introduce our panel for this afternoon. If you can join me up on stage. We have industry, we have leadership, we have entrepreneurship, and I'm very excited for this innovation conversation. So joining us today, we have Dr. Fiona Mack. Fiona, could you tell us a little bit about your background, your relationship to innovation, your current initiatives?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. So you said my name is Dr. Fiona Mack. Currently, I work at Johnson & Johnson Innovation. I think I have the longest title of anyone here. I recently joined the organization as being head of East North America, part of our external scientific innovation. And in this role, I really help support our ecosystem being quite broadly across all of East North America. And that encompasses what we're doing from an early stage incubation perspective, what we do in early stage partnering, and also helping to support any of our transactions that go on through the region, from academic collaborations, even onto some of our investment activities from an equity investment perspective. I started off my career as a bench scientist. So I have a PhD in molecular biology. Really wanted to do that more translational work, so understanding what drug development could be. I've been throughout the large pharma. So most of my career has been spent in large pharma, having first started out working at Wyeth in the oncology division, which was subsequently acquired by Pfizer. So have been through a lot of these transitions of changing management, changing direction, but during the course of a lot of that transition, I was able to work with a lot of external collaborators. So really validating novel technologies from antisense therapies to T-cell bispecifics, and really starting to be that kind of conduit to what large pharma can bring to early stage entrepreneurs, and then helping the early stage entrepreneurs understand the perspective of a large pharma, really to bring those innovations to those kind of key go-no-go decisions so that they can progress. From there, I worked at Roche, so a Swiss German company, really helping to support their external innovation strategies in oncology. And then briefly, we spent some time at Ipsen in business development, focusing on neuroscience, and decided during the pandemic time to join Johnson & Johnson to really help support their global network of life science incubators, that being the J-Labs, at the particular site at the Texas Medical Center. And there we covered a broad portfolio from, at the time, consumer, in addition to medical devices, and also pharma. I, after a few years there, really wanted to help continue to support incubation, so I moved on and worked at Bayer, or Bayer to many of you in the audience, and moving from Texas here to Cambridge. And Bayer wanted to also be able to support early stage entrepreneurs with a business development initiative. So they started an incubation space just right down the street here called Bayer CoLab. And it was really their flagship location for incubation, and then expanded that to really be in some of their other hubs in Shanghai and also in Berlin. So that same kind of ethos of trying to help support early stage innovation, leveraging the support of a large pharma. And now I'm back at Johnson & Johnson, really taking all of that expertise and seeing what we can really do for taking our global strategies that are across our therapeutic areas of interest, being oncology, neuroscience, and immunology, and really seeing how we can embed that within a regional perspective to establish those relationships that we really can help accelerate innovation. So happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
You know, this is a fabulous background because what Fiona is showing us is how many different roles change management can actually take and change leadership. And when we talk about the future and innovation, I'm very interested to hear your perspective on a few topics in the moment. Now, next to us, we are joined by Emilia Neuwirt. If you could tell us a little bit about your background as an entrepreneur, someone who is leading innovation, I would be very curious, particularly from the transatlantic side.
Thank you very much. So my name is Emilia Neuwirt. I'm actually on the other side of the external innovation world in pharma. So I'm a pharmacist by training and co-founder and CEO of EMUNO Therapeutics from Freiburg in Germany. We are a fairly young spin-off from the University Medical Center in Freiburg, founded in May last year, so really a fairly young company. What we do at EMUNO is to employ innovative biological effect-driven screening approaches to develop novel precision drugs to modulate the immune system, so to either enhance immune responses or to dampen specific immune responses. And with this, we want to create novel therapeutics, for example, to overcome cancer immune evasion or to treat autoimmune disorders. And as a startup, we really see ourselves as an early stage company. So our plan is to out-license or sell the products we develop to larger pharma companies at an early clinical stage or even at preclinical stages. We've seen it at the Broad Institute presentation. Also, we see ourselves at this very intersection between academia and the pharma industry. And my journey actually started with my PhD at the University Medical Center in Freiburg. So my PhD project basically laid the foundation for our first product within the company today, which is a small molecule macrophage activator we develop for cancer immunotherapy. And while today our team is still fairly small and acts locally from Freiburg, still our network and all our collaborations are already international and transatlantic, spanning, for example, partner research organizations we work together with, or contract research organizations, advisors across the Atlantic, key opinion leaders, big pharma, of course, and also international investors.
It sounds like you have a wealth of experience in putting to practice managing multiple stakeholders across multiple ecosystems. So I look forward to hearing more about that in a moment. Now, of course, last but not least, we're joined by Maggie O'Toole here in Boston. Could you share your role and background?
Certainly. Good afternoon. My name is Maggie O'Toole. I'm the CEO of LabCentral. For those of you not familiar with LabCentral, we are an economic development nonprofit. We are focused just in the state of Massachusetts, and we support early and mid-stage companies as they are getting launched, trying to reduce all of the barriers for them to get started. We're actually just right down the street is our flagship, about a block and a half, so it was a nice commute to get here. And that space is about 70,000 square feet. We have over 60 companies there at any given time that may range in size of just one single scientist with a single bench up to 10 to 15 scientists in a private suite. And then we have another space on this side of the street heading down towards Boston, 100,000 square feet, that is focused on later stage developed companies. Many of them are cell and gene therapy, but also covering a broad range of therapeutics. And then additionally, we support the Bayer CoLab, which is how I first came to know Fiona several years ago. And we also are in partnership with Harvard with 2 sites, one at the Harvard Business School in Alston and one at the Harvard Med School in Longwood. And there we work with folks who are associated with Harvard, whether they are students, grad students, postdocs, alumni, or professors who are starting an early stage biotech company.
That's brilliant. One of the interesting things that I've noticed working internationally that's a common denominator when you have a healthcare life science company scaling from Germany or anywhere else in Europe, it becomes very difficult to actually enter at a massive scale in the US that aligns with the operating capital they have. It becomes very, very expensive, in other words, to hit that critical mass in the US. And so having strategic partners who have the know-how, the understanding to operationalize companies and to help them set up with the bodies of evidence they need clinically and operationally to hit that scale becomes very, very important. Now, Fiona, from Johnson & Johnson, you're one of those strategic partners in several different capacities. Can you tell us more about what you're focused on and how you're acting to open doors for innovation through J&J?
Absolutely. So just to highlight, the innovation centers that we have are kind of strategically located in key research hubs. So we have one here in Boston, San Francisco, in London, and Shanghai. And those are many kind of intended to be these conduits for us to take this regional focus on understanding really what's the science occurring at the ground level, and then being able to support that with really what could be the broader expertise of a large pharma organization, be that scientific expertise in many ways, as we understand really how to make products, as we are highlighting otherwise, really the rigor that it takes to bring a pharmaceutical into the clinic and beyond, but also the regulatory approaches that could really streamline that, how to really commercialize that, and bringing together the broader suite of tools within an organization for how do you raise that capital to get to the next stage. And so we have an equity arm that's been around for 50 years, that's JDDC, that also thinks about early stage and later stage investment opportunities, in addition to our broader business development team that is also looking at ways you can partner for clinical studies or clinical stage assets and beyond. But we also think about what do we do at the very early stages, the 1 or 2 person companies that really have a nascent idea, maybe first-time founders. How do we get them to that next stage of understanding? So developing that early stage relationship, particularly through incubation, has also been something that's kind of been key to what we do in these innovation centers. So we can have our physical hubs, which Johnson & Johnson has the J-Labs organization, and we have those physical wet lab incubators also in San Francisco, in San Diego, and in New York, and in Shanghai. But we also realize that not all innovation is going to happen, let's say, on the coast of the United States or in these kind of innovation hubs. So how do we continue to support those entrepreneurs? So we think about how we can partner with other incubator spaces that do have the wet lab space, but also still want to have that level of expertise and guidance from a large pharma. So we do sponsors for LabCentral, but we're also have a virtual network for companies that may not require our physical space or may not be able to relocate from their current physical space or want to really build their company and stay within their own region as long as they can, but they still need to have access to potentially raising capital. So we want to, through a virtual network, really get them exposure to VCs within our network, our own investment organization, and really to also have that interactions with our own scientists so they can help address the kind of key challenges. So we think about from a partnering perspective, how can we incubate a company, how can we invest, how can we collaborate, and then how can we ultimately partner with them from a licensing asset to a collaboration and take a global focus to how we can really achieve that.
That's very interesting because something that was mentioned earlier from the Broad Institute is how well-structured industry is for operationalizing new technologies in the market. And there's so many new innovations that are created, so many technologies that fail to translate to clinical practice, if that is the goal, because of the things that Fiona has mentioned, the regulatory barriers, the data collection for submission, and it goes so far beyond just making sure what you submitted to the MDR, for instance, translates to the FDA. These areas where she speaks are the bodies of practice in workflow, in clinical management, in perhaps changing the standard of care eventually, making sure that there's a business. And what I really like that you mentioned is that you have multiple ways of engaging new innovators to see that they are doing those other business operations in tandem with their innovation so that it can be realized in the field. as opposed to staying in the science office. So could you tell us just a little bit about when you're looking at a potential partnership or engaging an innovation, maybe there is an existing business with it, or perhaps it's ready to spin out of a university in Germany. What would be your go, no-go thinking about, is this really ready? Is there a program or a system at Johnson & Johnson where we can take this and work with it?
Yeah. So kind of highlight maybe just a potential recent success that we have out of the ETH in Zurich. So it was a company that was spun out and was part of our virtual model for EMEA, for incubation. And so it was really looking at what could be a challenge for, let's say, the Johnson & Johnson portfolio, really to develop oral peptides. And so it really, for us to invest, it's really trying to understand what is the differentiating feature of this company. Is it aligned with our overall strategy? And strategy can be either we are really trying to fill a gap in our portfolio and asset, or it could be something that really can enable our portfolio of today and our portfolio of the future. So this was an understanding that we have lots of peptides, as others may have, but what are the challenges of really making that kind of scalable and broadly applicable? And that was really going to an oral therapies. So this was a very small company, maybe 10 people. They just incorporated about a year ago. But they were part of our virtual network, which allowed us to really help craft what the question was going to be and help them develop what's going to be the challenge for this particular device that they were generating. This company incubated with us, and then actually Johnson & Johnson acquired them. It was announced about 4 or 5 days ago. So really giving them the tools to understand the needs of the industry, help them accelerate it to the next step, and then ultimately led to a broader collaboration. But it all stemmed upon some kind of understanding of what our strategic priorities are. But we know for early stage entrepreneurs, that can always be a little fluid, right? So how do we craft it into the next stage and continue to remain engaged so that our priorities grow together until they became, and obviously, an acquisition target for our company.
And I like that a lot, because many times you have scientific innovation that you almost stumble upon. It comes from years of research, and it's not an accident, but then the innovation portion has to be tied to something that is an unmet need in practice. Sometimes that can be just an iterative approach where it doesn't translate to a business, but sometimes those iterative approaches can be absolutely revolutionary. And for larger organizations to be able to run with that and say, this does offer us a competitive advantage, it fills a piece of our portfolio, can be very interesting for smaller organizations to take advantage of, so you can stay researching and doing what you do best, while organizations like J&J can also take that and complement that in the market. This is one of the big challenges with new ventures, I think, in looking into the future, is how do you actually mobilize these new technologies? Maggie, could you tell us about how LabCentral is working to mobilize new ventures?
Sure. One of the most recent things that we've been exploring is what everyone is talking about, AI, obviously. In order for us to respond to that and the number of applications that we're seeing from companies who are either actively incorporating that into their work or are really focused very much solely on how that is going to impact the biotech industry, we went after a grant from Mass Tech Collaborative in Massachusetts, which enabled us to start the first AI BioHub. We received $1.9 million from the state, and that enabled us to partner with C10 Labs, which is a venture studio and incubator here in Massachusetts that is also focused on AI, largely in the tech space. Their interest, though, was supporting companies that they were seeing in the bio space, but they didn't have that infrastructure. So in partnering with us, we were able to launch that earlier this summer, and had over 100 applications from companies all over the US and some from out of state. We accepted 15 into that first cohort, and the demo day is actually happening in just a few weeks. And then we'll be launching the next cohort in the spring with another 15 companies. And so for this, it's something really that we're trying to catalyze. This is a hub in Massachusetts, and also better respond to the needs of our companies and leveraging assets from the state that we as a nonprofit wouldn't necessarily have available to us.
You know, something I find very unique about LabCentral is the way you're working with so many different types of stakeholders across that ecosystem. You're helping to find the funding, the lab space, the mentorship, the access to industry. Can you tell us, in this experience and all of these programs and international partnerships I believe you have, what are you seeing that really moves the needle forward in getting them out from, the lab into practice?
It's really being a part of the ecosystem. There's no sort of magic ingredient, but what we really see in the most successful companies are the ones that are actively taking part in everything that Kendall Square has to offer, and that globally we can offer to them. So whether it's relationships with the Broad, whether it's relationships with J&J or Bayer or some of the equipment companies that we work with, it's really leveraging all of those relationships as well as the venture capital community, both here in the U.S. and overseas. So it's the ability to have so many players in one ecosystem, and I think as a nonprofit, we're able to bring all of those folks together in sort of we're the least threatening party of that group. We don't take any equity, so we're able to engage many stakeholders together and really leverage that for the companies.
It's interesting because you mentioned all of these stakeholders, and if you come from smaller markets, it can be easy to work within clusters. That's one of the brilliant things that I love about Europe, is that there is, in most markets, a strategy and cooperation between specific regions and in regions. In the US, we do not structure ourselves in clusters quite the same way. They form organically. And the challenge then is, when you come to a market like Boston, is to figure out how to navigate all those different ecosystem stakeholders. How do you understand the relationships between the VCs, between their competition in deal flow, and managing all of that? And that can be both a challenge and an opportunity to really get immersed into the ecosystem and figure out, okay, what are my next strategic steps?
One of the things that we are just launching right now is a soft landing program, specifically speaking to that. So where we have many applications, obviously from the Boston area, many also from San Francisco, San Diego, Texas, North Carolina, lots of other little pockets. It is more challenging to come from overseas. And so we have recently developed a soft landing pilot program that we have just signed with Denmark, and we're about to launch with Japan and Korea to provide deeply discounted and sometimes free bench space for these companies who qualify for the program so they can get to Cambridge. Their funds are not as robust in those areas as the VC funds are here. So it enables them to come here in a 3-month program where they get a wraparound from LabCentral. We give bespoke introductions to VCs, to big pharma sponsors. We are able to do CSO and CEO mentorship programs so that they can just learn how to engage in this ecosystem and then help pave the way for future companies to come to the US.
And I really can't emphasize the power of having those sort of warm introductions into the community and how far that goes, especially if you do tend to be on the more modest or introverted side of engaging with these big, powerful organizations and VCs. You know, as an entrepreneur, of course, one of the biggest challenges is just managing that runway, getting to scale in the US, figuring out, do I have a business here? Does this provide a return for all of those taxpayer dollars back in Germany? There's such a strong non-dilutive funding ecosystem there by comparison of the US. And there are many very interesting programs that we don't necessarily have an analog to, such as Horizon Europe. Emilia, I'd love to hear about your perspective as a leader in innovation from the other side of the table, how you've looked at the non-dilutive funding side and how that's changed your pathway in scaling.
Yeah, of course. So for us as startup founders, non-dilutive funding was very attractive in the beginning phases. We actually recently received seed funding from the European Innovation Council. And I think this is actually a really great way for startups to bridge this very famous valley of death. So where you're at the very early stage, you might already have quite some robust research data you collected, but maybe the technology and also your company is not ready yet for, let's call it, the real world VC investment. And I think public non-dilutive funding is really a great opportunity there to very rapidly progress your technology and also mature your company to really mature both the technology and the company to this investment ready stage. And this is, I think, exactly what happened to us. So we were really great to actually have received this funding. And for us, of course, it's also great to be involved in a European funding scheme, because this also really helps us to already now widen our outreach beyond local and national networks only, to, of course, create greater visibility for us as a startup and also enable us to already now talk to international partners, which is great.
You know, this is a big challenge because, I mean, you can't just go forth with the same sort of proposal. There's many different priorities with each of these different funding schemes, and then you start to look at dilutive funding in the US when you need to increase your operating scale. How would you say you've addressed successfully all the different due diligence requirements in setting up different data rooms with different priorities, different standards, but also just the different perspectives on what's a priority and expectations in engaging with the different types of funding bodies with which you've succeeded?
Yeah, I think that's a very tricky one. So, well, I guess to start with, what is really good is to actually have someone on the team who's experienced in doing these kinds of processes and who has been through it and who's also experienced in different environments. So not only German environments, maybe not only European environments, but really international experience is really helpful. And I think what is also really good is to, from the very beginning on, build a very strong network as an entrepreneur, in order to be able to reach out to your network partners and actually get feedback at the very early stage when you start writing your grants or whatever, and start building up your due diligence platforms or whatever.
So one of the things that I often think about in this stage is the most expensive thing you can do is try to afford a cheap lawyer. And sometimes you get, cheap advice that winds up costing you quite a lot. As an entrepreneur coming from the German market and trying to navigate our very complicated spectrum of healthcare systems and to find your way forward with so much more competition in the US market, what would you say has been, in your experience, typically underestimated or overlooked as something that you wish you had known, perhaps before starting this journey forward?
I think what's maybe sometimes underestimated is the effort you should put into documentation and data management at the very early stages in order to succeed. I think it's very crucial to, from the very beginning on, invest resources, invest time and money into really building up a robust data management within the company that has a good basically technological quality that is also that operates in a findability and interoperability manner, so to say, and that is also able to scale as the company grows. So this is really essential. And you spoke about cheap lawyers. I think you also have to be aware that sometimes as an entrepreneur, you have to invest some money in order to succeed. So I would, for example, never try to save money on, for example, patent lawyers, because this is crucial for you as a startup to really have a very good and robust IP strategy and to also be on the safe side there. So don't be blue-eyed and save money on your patent lawyer.
I'm not a patent lawyer, but I very much like that. You know, some things do wind up carrying more disproportionate advantage than others. I'm curious, Maggie, you've been working with different regions. You're now scaling from Denmark and this initiative with women's health to others. What have you seen in entrepreneurship and innovation that has had disproportionate impact to accelerating their success?
Oh, that's a great question. I was talking with someone that just introduced themselves to me. I think he's here somewhere right before this started, and they were saying that they have a client who is looking for space here and would like to come to LabCentral, but felt like it was too expensive. And so I, of course, responded explaining more about all of the various programs that we have that are quite a bit less expensive than what it may appear to be on the website. And I would say the same goes with investing in a good incubator space versus a cheap one. I think it's really the connections and that you make that are really going to be the game changers for catalyzing your company. Fiona's example is terrific about a company that they engaged in very, very early that later led to a partnership. We have something called Golden Tickets, which J&J also has, which you get access to if you are in the right spaces and meeting the right people. And those are the catalysts for those later partnerships or acquisitions. So I don't think you can discount the importance of where you are location.
I think that we need to talk more about these golden tickets. The sounds, if this is something we're doing, are we giving these out later to the audience? Is there a raffle? No,
I think
yes.
Emilia, you won a golden ticket at BioLabs, right? Yeah.
Yes, so we in February this year we won a golden ticket sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim for BioLabs in Heidelberg, and also from the startup perspective, I can say it's great. It's a great accelerator for us as a startup. It's a great opportunity. It offers so many opportunities for us we would otherwise not be able to access. So I think it's something that really accelerates innovation and startups.
I just wanted to pick up on the thread regarding the non-dilutive funding and what can be challenges for early stage entrepreneurs, either really thinking that they have to go out for VC or equity investments. And one thing I think we can also consider in this environment are some of those kind of smaller scale feasibility MTA studies that can go on with large pharma. So thinking about what value do those relationships and partnerships can do. It's not always simply about the financials, but it's the guidance and expertise and learnings that you can have through that collaboration. So being open to doing some kind of smaller dollar partnership deals and not simply looking at all the deal comparables to get you to the next stage, but what could be kind of incremental that can give you more proof of concept to help really increase your value. And those could be those earlier stage partnering deals, not necessarily licenses, but really the assessment to really validate your platform. So as we talked about some of the challenges, certainly in the US with funding opportunities, maybe there being less of this non-dilutive funding available, how can large pharma help really sustain early stage innovation? And this could be through helping you kind of expand your validation platform by doing these early stage collaborations.
I really appreciate your strategic perspective, because what I'm hearing is that there may be a lot of value to the strategic partners, to the longer term vision, even if it's not the brightest, shiny thing every time. Some of the challenges that I see with many European organizations is the reluctancy to pay for things, because there's so much non-dilutive funding. Americans were used to having to pay for everything mostly. And this is very important because it affects how you put value on something and what you're willing to commit to when you're in a higher risk situation commercially entering the US. Fiona, you have such an incredible depth of experience and such a breadth of wisdom across multiple organizations. one of the, I would say, tendencies is to have a bit of concern around the intentions behind large corporations. Small organizations in America, we might have a bit of reputation around lawyers and litigation. And this can be concerning. How do I engage safely an organization like Johnson & Johnson? We know we're not going to skimp on IP lawyers, but then what do you see when you are bringing these partnerships? You really want to um, emphasize the value of that acceleration by working with you and not necessarily think, we're just going to be consumed by this incredibly powerful organization.
As I said, I've been on most of that opposite side of the table where it's large pharma. We go into a due diligence, we bring 30 people to the 2 people who are in the company, we kind of overwhelm them. But the intent is really to provide a lot of rigor to analysis and not necessarily to overwhelm. So wanted to really be a partner of choice, and that is how Bayer has approached the situation, that is how Johnson & Johnson, really what can we do together as opposed to competing or simply taking an asset. So they really want to have this true collaboration with a partner. And so it starts out even with a little bit of a, what is our relationship with them? Do people get along in the same room? How are we going to address challenges? And if they already begin to see that there are roadblocks to that, even if the deal terms are favorable, many people will be like, I don't know how we can really truly develop something with this innovator, just given how our cultures are kind of clashing. So it really, that interpersonal relationship also needs to be there, in addition to it being a very sound, a reasonable business practice, a differentiated asset. And so for us, we once again, all the foundation is in the science, but it's also who is the partner? Do we think that they're going to be with us in the long run? And I think that's what pharma, or at least our organization, always thinks about. This isn't simply a 6-month endeavor. This is a longer term strategy. Our goal is to get a drug or medical device to a patient. That's not going to happen within the 6 months. So can we live with this person? Can we marry? How is our marriage going to evolve over time? Can we continue to work with them? So I wouldn't feel that it is overwhelming. They really are intended to work with you. We bring our scientists into these discussions. That's the first part of the relationship. Make sure our transactors, of course, there are probably red lines for all organizations, but the idea is to have those conversations early. So if we do get to a go, no go, then we both can walk away. Our also premise is really, we want to be able to give good feedback to the entrepreneurs for when we decide maybe not to move forward with something. There's at least a good understanding of why, and our strategies change all the time. I shouldn't say that because I like to say that they're continuous, but 6 months from now, based upon clinical data, our strategy may change. We may then want to come back to an entrepreneur and reassess. So we also want to make sure that we're maintaining a good relation with them over time. So we are, part of our regional strategy is so that we begin to learn who you are in the audience, so it doesn't feel as if you're handing over your baby to a large pharma, is that we really are helping it grow together.
There's so much in that about bilateral trust because, when you also look at the flip side of this, organizations like Fiona's are contributing a ton of expertise and resources just to take meetings with entrepreneurs and innovators. And they're probably not very inclined to just have meetings for the fun of it. I think there's probably quite the pipeline of new innovation at the door to work with organizations like yours. And of course, a lot of that innovation, as was mentioned earlier, is based on AI. So this is radically changing the playing field. It's changing the field with policy, with investment, with staffing, with careers, with early stage research and biotech platforms and organizations like the Broad Institute. Fiona, could you tell us your thoughts on leading through AI and this radical change that may be #disrupting innovation in our field a little bit, just a little bit?
Maggie certainly highlighted what they're doing with their AI cohort. We're seeing just not only early stage innovators throwing AI into their names, but really how we're employing it to accelerate drug discovery within large pharma. That could be from defining chemical equity to really doing more of the structure, function, and biology. For our medical device perspective, we certainly are using AI to understand from a surgical perspective how to increase the sensitivity of that and the outcomes from surgery and some of the image analysis. When you're in medical devices, unlike a pharmaceutical asset where you have a very good idea of what the PK is going to be and some expectations of efficacy. For a device, it's often also very dependent upon the skills of the surgeon. So how do we use AI to really improve that in real time for some of the surgeons? And also how do we utilize that to manage kind of patient outcomes? So Johnson & Johnson has a variety of ways that they're doing it from a med tech perspective, from a drug discovery perspective, then also to realize how do we get the right drug to the right patient. That could be from a clinical trial, understanding some of this predictive analysis of who's going to be response, to also drug supply. How do we really disseminate a lot of our drugs globally across the world through our supply management and using AI to support that. What I start to think about is like these are great tools and we're learning how to employ them kind of across the chain. I think we still haven't seen really the success rate of like the first AI design drugs. There's some evidence that really some of those phase 1 studies may have much more success rate than non-AI developed ones, but I still think we're waiting to see how that outcome is. What I like to think about is maybe a little bit of this unknown. We see how it is maybe making our processes more efficient, but I'm not sure what new jobs are going to be created that are going to come out of it. And it's just like an answer as we think about how do we train the next stage of scientists, yes, to use this tool, but how do we teach them to really draw more insights for these tools to create new areas of research. And so as I'm thinking about what are going to be our challenges in the next 5 years, some of it is going to be how do we handle not having the non-dilutive funding that helps support early stage, but then also how do we really utilize AI as effective as possible to create more aspects of new biology.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting. We might need a whole other future forum for AI again. In thinking about and kind of starting to wrap up how we're looking at the future in transatlantic collaboration, in science diplomacy, Emilia, as an innovator, could you tell us what you feel is perhaps an area of resilience in all of these changes with policy, funding, AI, and everything else? Is there something you feel that is lasting and something stable in this current environment?
Well, I would definitely say it's these trusted science relationships we have built over years. So we have trusted partners that we know that we can rely on, and I think the outer, circumstances do not affect these trusted relationships we have built over the years. So I would say this is certainly something we can rely on.
And I appreciate that, especially relationships that I see Maggie creating with Denmark and other countries. One of the questions that I hear frequently is, well, do you want European innovation in the American healthcare system? And my personal response is always, yes, please send help. And I see new biobridges being created and new relationships. So, Maggie, in conclusion, can you tell us, do you want European technology at LabCentral?
Absolutely. I think that was mentioned earlier. I'm not sure which of the speakers, but the collaboration that, between Pfizer and BioNTech, and we just see so many collaborations that come out. And I always find that in sort of the worst times, the best things arise, and some of those came out of COVID, and I think some of those things are going to come out of this funding challenge that we're all experiencing. For LabCentral, I see it specifically because of the funding challenges. We have more space than we did in the past. And so that is leading us to be able to outreach to companies overseas, to scientists overseas, and offer space that we never could have done before because we had a wait list of companies in the US. And so I look at it as an amazing opportunity that we have, not one I would have wished for, but it is really incredible, the relationships and connections that we're now having with people all over Europe and Asia. And so I really welcome that. I think there's something amazing that is going to develop from this that we just don't know what it is exactly yet.
So what I'm hearing is that instead of waiting and seeing or relaxing, we lean in and instead we double down.
Yes.
Yeah.
People keep talking about that they're trying to hunker down to get through the next 3 or 4 years, hopefully not 8 years. I didn't say that publicly. But, at LabCentral, we are doubling down. We are saying we're not putting our heads in the sand. We are going to find new and innovative ways to persevere and to be even stronger despite what is happening out in the ecosystem and administration.
Thank you so much. So I think maybe we have time for just one question, but if you do have questions and don't have a chance to ask them, I know all of our panelists will hang around for 3 or 4 minutes afterwards in the reception, and please do feel free to reach out to them. Do we have time for a single question? And do we have a single question? Well, I have a single question, and then we can segue on. Fiona, what do we do next?
For us, I'm actually really, having just started this role in the past like 2 to 3 months, I really see a quite push to do more deals and understanding I also think they're like doubling down. They're not going for we're just going to look for phase 2 assets that are already kind of de-risked. It really is more of this plethora of these preclinical, pre-IND assets they really want to support, and then thinking about how do we still almost in some ways expand our ideas of incubation to continue to support that next asset, that next generation of therapeutics. So I'm optimistic that we are going to really kind of brew through this, but I still think what comes out of it is still quite an unknown what's really going to rise to the top. But I see while VC dollars are still there, but only for hire, the number of deals that we're able to do in that early space is actually either the same or increasing.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that we don't know how we will do it, but we will get through all of this together. Yes. Well, that's excellent. Thank you so much for joining our panel, and I will turn it back over to Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you, and thank you for ending on such a positive note, all of you. This was actually what we had hoped for, but not necessarily expected. So thank you very much for that. My task is to wind things up a bit, to bring things together again. And I think one of the key themes that ran through the keynote and also through our discussion right now was collaboration and support. We learned earlier that the future revolutions in biotechnology are nothing to be afraid of, but that shaping them will need twofold cooperation. On the one hand, between academic creativity and industrial scale, and on the other hand, international collaboration across borders. We also learned that not all innovations are going to be happening in hotspots, and right now this is also already the case. So we will also need collaboration with local partners and also through virtual networks. I thought this was a very good impulse. Also, mentorship was mentioned, mentoring, the importance of mentoring. Again, collaboration and support for more experience to less experience, mentorships to practice, and bringing stakeholders together in a low-threat environment. I thought this was also a very important setting. I hope that the DWH can provide a low-threat environment, but if you ever do feel threatened by us, please do let us know. We also heard about the importance of forming international networks at an early stage, as you mentioned, and but also not forgetting the documentation and data management, of course. We learned about the importance of interpersonal relationships. So the business case is the one side, but the interpersonal relationship also has to work. Finally, we got the very positive message that trusted partnerships are going to be resilient to disruptions from the outside, and that right now we're actually having an amazing opportunity to collaborate more closely with our friends in the United States. So as you put it, Elizabeth, you said, let's lean in. Now it's time to dig in. I'm afraid we don't have golden tickets for you, and we also don't have genomes for everyone, but we do have food and drinks for everyone. So please join us outside. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today, and a warm thank you to our panel again. Thank you.